Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Blumberg, and I am Swiftland's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the next webinar of Swiftland's Diversity Discovery Institute Year 2, I is for Involving. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Linda Bruno. Linda has been developing and conducting training workshops for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers workshops on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance, and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her workshops based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life application. Linda is also certified with DDI and Achieve Global. Please welcome Linda and enjoy her webinar this morning. Linda?
Thank you so much, Aaron, and welcome everybody today to I is for Involving. When I was thinking about what to put in this particular webinar, the first thing that came to mind for me is we need to refresh ourselves a bit on what diversity are we trying to involve in our libraries. So would you just take a second and type into the chat box one of the topics that we've covered in the last couple of years about diversity? Would you just type those in the chat box just to kind of give us a background of what we're looking at as we talk about involving today? For instance, we often think of culture as part of our diversity efforts, and that is a very natural fit for that. But what other ones have we talked about along the way? I see some folks are typing, so you don't need to think you lost your sound. I'm just waiting. I don't want to talk over the top of people's responses. So I see some coming into the chat box. I hope. I see people typing, but the chat box is not. There we go. Physical issues. Absolutely. And that could be any number of things, couldn't it, Lynn? It could be people who are in wheelchairs or struggle with walking or have hearing impairments or sight impairments or neurological issues or any number of things. Jamie says, I haven't had your lectures yet, but I would assume religion. Absolutely, Jamie. There's hundreds of different kinds of religions and spiritual practices out there that we might think of as we're trying to involve others. Socioeconomics, absolutely, Alyssa. All kinds of things come to mind, don't they? I want to just kind of refresh us as we're thinking through this morning. I was thinking about culture, of course, and ethnicity, which is the natural fit when we think of diversity, but also gender diversity, because sometimes I think we get focused on one gender or the other depending on what we're trying to do, what program we're trying to offer, what event we're trying to offer. We sort of get skewed one way or the other, and we don't often think about that. And of course, the people on the spectrum need to be involved as well. And age is a big one, because whatever age group you're in, it seems to me you don't necessarily understand the other age group's perspective. And it doesn't matter if you're older now and you've gone through all those other age groups, you still don't understand them. And it doesn't matter if you're younger and you've been around people older than you all your life, you still don't necessarily understand them. So when we're thinking about involving people in our libraries and how that relates to diversity, we need to take that broad look, don't we? I was talking the other day to somebody and they said it was actually yesterday in the Leadership Institute, they said we did an adult coloring program and the younger people got upset because they wanted to color too. So they said, no, you can't color in the adult program because the adults really want it to be for adults, but we'll set up a teen program for you. The same way we just make assumptions about things, don't we? So we need to be careful of age groupings, because before that would have been a natural thing. When we said it was for adults, younger people wouldn't have wanted to be involved, and now there's a lot more interaction that we need to be aware of as we're trying to involve people. The introvert-extrovert spectrum, which we discussed at one of our sessions. If you think about the fact that introverts recharge by being alone and having quiet time, but extroverts recharge by talking and visiting and having fun and being very social, you can see that trying to involve those two groups in the same activity can be challenging. So sometimes the context for involving them might be different activities or different spaces for them to be involved in your library because they have that need to either have quiet and downtime, or they have that need to be very social, very loud, very vocal, very let's visit, let's talk, let's catch up, and the introverts not so much. So involving those two groups in the same activity can be challenging. Even in making sure they're involved in your library can be challenging if we try to use the same spaces and the same programs for both groups. So introverts, extroverts is another thing. Geographical is another thing, because people from different regions, not just from different countries, but even from different regions within the United States, have very different perspectives on things. I know that I've talked to people that have moved to Florida from some of the faster paced cities or regions in the United States, and they are having trouble adjusting to the slower pace that they find in many aspects of Florida life. So even geographical can present a challenge for how are we going to involve these people and make them feel like this library is their home as well. And the last one I have listed here, and there have been dozens that we've discussed, so this is by no means an exhaustive list. But the last one I list is life stage, because this has gotten so varied over the last couple of decades. When we talk about now, younger people are actually living at home longer, so they have a different perspective on what they want from the library. But you have younger people who move out from their parents' home, and so they're living on their own, and they might have different issues, such as they need budget help or something like that. You have young single parents. You have middle-aged families, people who are in their 50s raising young children now because they started their families later. You have the younger parents who might be in their early 20s that are raising a family. The variety is tremendous. Now we have a lot of grandparents raising new families. So when you're talking about trying to diversify what you offer to those people and include and involve those people, you could probably sit and make a list just in life stage of a dozen different perspectives of life stage, couldn't you? And so those are good things to do. When you're thinking about your programming, your events, how are we going to involve the people that we're trying to target, it's a good thing to sit down and make a list. Just brainstorm with a diversity of people on your staff even, and sit down and make a list of the areas that you want to think about. It doesn't mean you can reach everybody. You are probably setting yourself up for failure if you think that there are a dozen different categories of any one of these and you'll be able to reach them all effectively. So that becomes an issue of trying to target what you're doing and make sure that you are focusing on the groups that you can serve the most effectively, rather than setting yourself up for failure. The issue becomes that although libraries have a great record of offering a variety, just a plethora of programming and services, sometimes those programs and services are developed based on assumptions or on best practices at another library. But those assumptions that we make from our perspective do not necessarily fit what our patrons are looking for. Best practices at a Washington, D.C. library may be totally different than what needs to be offered at a Maitland library. It just depends on what our audience consists of. So although we can certainly use those best practices as a starting place for discussion, we really disserve ourselves, if you will, when we decide that we should do that because it worked so well for those people. It doesn't mean it will work well for us. And because you are all so knowledgeable and so experienced at offering such a wide variety of programming and services, the assumptions you make are often spot on. But the involving piece of that then becomes a little more challenging if you haven't actually tapped into the people who need to be involved. So before we go any further, I wanted to just address this idea of actually involving people. We want to make sure our patrons are getting what they want, not just what we assume that they might want. So what we decide to offer needs to involve them in the decision-making process, not just involve them in the activities and the programs, which requires extra effort sometimes, but also involve them in that decision-making process. When you're thinking about actually involving them in the program, sometimes you actually have to go out to them, don't you? You have to go find the people that would be interested in this particular program. Maybe it's a Chamber of Commerce group. Maybe it's a Mothers of Preschoolers group. Maybe it's a certain school that's too far from the library and you may have to go there to serve them. So that certainly is a piece of involving those people in what you're doing. But it will benefit you highly if you can actually involve them in the decision-making process, which is kind of a form of market research. What are they really looking for? If we're trying to serve our market to the best of our ability, we cannot do that without knowing what they're looking for. As I was researching this particular topic, I got lost in one of those rabbit trails that you find on the internet, and this particular trail led to a website from Christchurch, New Zealand, which is a city in New Zealand who had an earthquake in February of 2011. And so as I was perusing around what they were talking about with their library, what I discovered was the library was destroyed during the earthquake in February of 2011, and as they were discussing what they wanted the library, the new library, to be, they decided to really get the community involved. So they opened up a website, and it was called Your Voice. This website was, and it was just a discussion forum, and they would ask certain questions and they would ask for people's input. And I wanted to give you some idea of what they went through to do this, because it's not easy to involve people in what's going to happen at your library. They ended up with over 2,400 ideas that could be delineated, that they could pull out of there. And I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what happened as they were talking about this, to show you the variety and the actual opposing viewpoints they were getting. One comment was they were talking about culture, and this lady said, we're not all English or Maori, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but apparently that is a primary culture in New Zealand. She says it would be impractical to cover all cultures permanently, but each could have a few weeks, then turn it over. And I'm thinking about the absolute nightmare that a library would have of trying to change the culture of the library every few weeks. So that one made me smile. And then as I read down further, one person said it's a library, not a youth center. By all means, build a youth center. But guess what? The next comment said, right at the back, have a cafe with a view to the outside and not interrupting anyone who wants quiet time. And then this person put, but close to the children's book area. And I'm thinking within the same statement, she gave opposing views, because I don't know about all of you, when I've seen a children's book area in a library, it's not near quiet time because those are kind of two opposite things. Kids don't tend to be quiet when they're in a play area. Another comment was this person wanted the library as a quiet, peaceful place to read, relax, and de-stress, because that would benefit the health of people of all ages. So that kind of goes back to what challenges they're facing, whether it's physical or mental or any kind of challenges they might be facing. This person felt that the library being quiet and peaceful would help with that. The very next statement says, I'd like to see space for creativity, areas for visual arts and performances, then display more of the library's book collection was another comment. So I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of all the things they faced when they were trying to develop what they were going to do. Another person said, I'd hate to see it be a book museum. And another person said, keep the library for books. So they fought this just as you do in trying to decide what is the best thing we can do for our patrons. It ended up on this discussion forum, one of the last comments that was made said it would be awesome to see as many cultures that are present in Canterbury to be represented as possible, but with, pay attention to this, 180 different nationalities alone here, it will be difficult for all voices to have an equal hearing. And I think that's a good lesson for us to understand that although you may not have 180 different nationalities, if you sat down with a pen and just started brainstorming how many differences you have represented in your library, you would probably come up with 180 with all of the different categories that we talked about. So we need to understand that this library, even though they get to start from scratch, and wouldn't that be fun to be able to start from scratch with the building and everything, but still you can hear by these comments they are going to have a group of people that are not happy with them when they're done. It doesn't matter which way they go. If the library focuses all on books, there's going to be the social people that are upset. If the library gets too social, there are going to be the book-loving, reading, quiet time people that are going to be upset. So then it was their job to filter through that 2,400 comments and figure out what would be most meaningful for the majority of the people that they were going to serve. They have not even opened yet. They did this discussion forum in 2014. They ended up saying they were going to include a cafe. That was one of the things that came out of it. A community arena with a couple hundred seats, exhibition space for those artists and so forth in the community, outdoor terraces where people could actually go outside and enjoy nature while they were at the library, and then specific areas for families and children. They don't expect that to be done until 2018. So obviously this is monumental, and it's monumental on a smaller scale, if you will, when you are trying to do these things in your library, isn't it? So I just kind of wanted to give you that background to help you understand that people all over the world face these issues of how do we involve our community, how do we include everybody we need to include, and sometimes we still don't get it right, even after we do it to that extent. So the basic thing is, how do we find out what they want? And we very often think we know what they want because, gosh, this program had great success. Let's have 5 more of those kinds of programs. Well, that will help the people that are already coming to that program, but it doesn't really diversify us, does it? It doesn't really pull in anybody new or different or of different thought processes or anything like that. So let's look at some ways that we could actually get our community involved. There are different methods of doing that, and what I'd like for you to think about for a moment is how could you involve your audience, if you will, your patrons or potential patrons in the process of planning what your library offers. How do you think you could do that? What are some ways you could do that? And again, I see people typing, so I'm going to hold off here for a moment while you all give that some thought and just type in a way that you think you could involve your community in helping you make decisions about how to involve them in the actual programming. Surveys, Corsina said, absolutely. And where would you put those surveys, Corsina? And I think Danielle said something like that as well. Let me just scroll back up here for a second. My scroll bar is always a little touchy with this program. Corsina and Danielle both said surveys, so how would you go about doing the surveys? What I'd like you to do is leave here today with some concrete ideas about what might help you. Jamie said we had a display that invited patrons to write comments on a poster board expressing what they wanted to see at their library. That's a great idea, and it's anonymous. They don't feel like they're put on the spot. They don't feel like they're in the limelight. They can just contribute their thoughts, and obviously I think people would know that you may or may not be able to use them all, but certainly allowing them that opportunity. And that could be an ongoing thing, couldn't it? It could be something where you left it out there all the time and people might not notice it all the time, so you could have activities around that board or something to feature that board periodically that would call their attention to it. But another thing we need to realize is that if we survey people this year and we plan everything based on that, we may really be very spot on as far as what we're offering to those people, but next year that could change, couldn't it? So we have to be careful of how long we decide these comments are going to serve us. The circulation desk, absolutely. Talk to people, right? You could do a paper survey at the circulation desk. You could actually, as Jamie said, talk to people so that you could just keep a little tick list beside your workstation of what people are looking for. After you've talked to a couple dozen people, you'll probably have a general list of what they would like to see or have offered, and then you can just put little tick marks beside it once you talk to people as they're coming up to the desk. Alyssa said, ask local churches and businesses and restaurants. Absolutely. What are people looking for? What do you think people would would enjoy. Go to the local businesses and talk to their patrons, or ask the businesses, how can we serve you? Ask the restaurants, how can we help you? Ask the churches, how can we help you? Because it's not only individuals we're trying to target, is it? There are specific groups within our communities, such as the churches and the businesses and the restaurants and the retail operations and maybe the banks. Maybe if you went to a bank and they said, you know, we've noticed we have workshops, but people seem to be intimidated by that, and we've noticed a lot of people are struggling with XYZ. Maybe that's a program we could help you with at the library, but maybe the library could sponsor it so that it's not as intimidating to people. And Jamie said, listen to complaints and comment cards. Absolutely. It's perfect. It's an evergreen idea. A few years ago, when I was working with Project Compass throughout the state, Alachua County had a little postcard that on the front of the postcard, it had artwork of that particular library. An artist had done some renderings several years before, and they had those renderings put on a postcard. And then on the back of the postcard, what they were doing it for was to show the value of the library, and it said, I love my library, or something like that, because, and then it had 2 or 3 categories that the person could check with a space for comments. And what they were doing with those cards was the people would leave them at the library. They didn't have to pay postage or anything. The director would go through them to make sure people didn't say something like, I wish you'd turn the heat up, or air conditioning on, or whatever, or the chairs are too hard, because that's not really good. It's good feedback for the director, but it's not really good feedback for the county commissioners, because they're not going to get involved in that. So she would go through that, he or she would go through that, and then send those cards on to the county commission so they could see the value of the library. Well, that same kind of idea could be used at your counter. Develop a little slogan that says, we want to hear from you, with a big ear on it. Put a big ear in your foyer. Have somebody that's really artistic, not just draw one, but maybe do a paper mache ear, and then have little comment cards under there that say, we want to hear from you. And you could have some things that you've heard in general on there, but if you have only a list of items, then those are the only options they can give you, aren't they? So rather than have strictly a list, you could start them out by thinking along those lines and give them a few things to choose from, but you want to make sure it's open-ended. What do I mean by open-ended when I say if you have a comment card, part of it needs to be open-ended? It sort of goes back to what Lynn typed in for the blog, doesn't it? You could put right on the comment card, what would you like to see at the library? So you put that link on your library website. Exactly, Mary. You allow write-ins. And matter of fact, you encourage write-ins, don't you? Because we're pretty, as a creature and as a species, we're pretty lazy, if you will. That's not probably the right term, but we're pretty complacent. And if you give me 6 options, I'll just check a few of them and I won't really give any thought to it. So the more options you give them, the more you allow them not to give it thought. So definitely you want to maybe encourage them to think about it. Here are some other comments we've had. What is your idea? In other words, we don't need to hear that comment again. We want something new from you. So when you say, what would you like to see at the library link on the website, then you need to figure out a way to actually encourage them to go there, don't you? How are you going to drive them to the blog? How are you going to drive them to the link at the website? Some people use the website probably frequently. Many people do not. So how are you going to actually reach out to the people that aren't normally in that space? And as Jamie said, you want to listen to complaints too, because complaints will tell you sometimes as much as a suggestion will. It will help you determine things that are not working well. So certainly there are a number of methods you can use. You could, as we said, you can do face-to-face, which can involve people just talking at the circulation desk. It can involve people floating around the library, and when they see somebody that's just kind of relaxing and chilling, they can just say, you know, what parts of the library do you enjoy, and is there something we're not doing that you would like to see us do if we have that capability? So you just open that conversation, don't you? And again, this shouldn't be a one-time thing, should it? Because if you decide that the month of July you're going to survey as many people as you can, you're going to take that information, you're going to revamp your programming and your services and your events, that's all well and good. But it doesn't mean you've reached everybody, and it also doesn't mean their attitudes and their thought processes may not change in the next 6 months to a year. So if you keep that conversation going, they expect it. They expect to see the ear appear in the lobby every couple of months. They expect people to ask them questions about what they're looking for. So face to face, what else would talking to people about this accomplish? If you're talking to them face to face, what else is happening while you're doing that? And I know that's kind of an open-ended question, and you're thinking, I don't know what she wants from me. I don't know what answer she wants. I'm thinking along the lines of, well, Lynn's typing, so I don't want to talk over her because she's probably thinking the same thing I am. So I'm going to allow her to pop that into the chat box. Yes, absolutely, Lynn. It shows we value their thoughts and opinions. And when you value people's thoughts and opinions, you develop a relationship, don't you? And the library, more today than ever before, is about relationships. And of course, you don't have personal relationships with everybody that comes into the library. But when you actually make the effort to stop and listen to them and value them as people, then you develop that relationship. And with that relationship comes loyalty to your organization. People want to feel appreciated. It's one of the biggest needs that the human being has. And when you value their thoughts and their feelings, because let's face it, there aren't many organizations that do. I order quite frequently online because I travel so much, and I will get sometimes 3 or 4 emails from the same company about leave us a review, leave us a review, leave us a review. That's not a relationship. They want the reviews so somebody else will buy from them. It's not about Linda Bruno. So think about that when you're talking to people. You want to also be developing that relationship as you go along. So face-to-face is very valuable to do that. Web blogs are great. Website links are great. Discussion forums on the web are great. But whenever you can reach out and actually personally look somebody in the eye, a lot of times you then can ask follow-up questions, because on a discussion forum, there may be a question that pops up or a comment that pops up 3 weeks ago, and by the time you ask the question, that person's moved on. You don't have a chance to follow up. But when you're face-to-face and they say, well, I wish we would have more quiet areas. So what are you looking for? Are you just looking for a corner of the library with a chair and a lamp, or do you need some space where there's actually an enclosed room? You can follow up. It doesn't mean you'll be able to accomplish everything, and I think most people understand that. But again, they feel valued because you've listened to their thoughts and opinions. Lynn says, ultimately, without the patrons' visitation and participation, we could lose our funding and buildings and jobs. Absolutely. Libraries close every year, sadly. And many times they close based on statistics. So the encouraging of that face-to-face interaction then also helps your statistics, because you have more people coming in the door, more circulation going out the door, all those kinds of things, more use because they feel that personal connection to you. They feel that involvement no matter who they are. And that means you walk up to young people and you ask the same questions as you ask the millennial or the middle-aged or the elderly person or the married mom or the single parent or the father with the kids or whoever it might be. When you have that interaction, you're developing that personal relationship and you're building your loyalty out in the community. And you're not trying to involve people strictly to build loyalty. It's just a byproduct of that. It's a win-win because you get the information you need to involve them in the decision making of what you're going to offer. And then as a plus, a bonus, an icing on the cake kind of thing, you also get the fact that they want to come back because they do feel valued. I like going to Publix. I think they have exceptionally good customer service, but I don't feel a personal connection there. I like their good customer service and that they're friendly and courteous and very helpful, but nobody's ever called me by name unless they've looked at my credit card. I walked into a hotel Wednesday night to stay overnight, and I've been there, I think 6 or 7 times now over the last year. And I walk in and Brian says to me, because he's the one always on desk duty at that time, he says, hey, Miss Linda, how are you? Last month when I was there, he said, boy, you're running late today. That kind of gives you that personal relationship, doesn't it? Now, unfortunately, Brian has never said, so what could we have done better over the last 6 or 8 months that you've stayed here? I don't think I will get that from them, but boy, what an opportunity it would be for them. Because I'm a business person traveling alone, a female, I could give them some really helpful input that would not be expensive. And I probably will anyway, in a very nice way, to try to help them with that. But it builds loyalty, doesn't it, when people feel valued? So face-to-face, of course, is great. Surveys are great. You need to make sure, though, that the surveys are going out to not just the people that are coming in the front door, but that they're going out to other groups that you think you might be able to serve. You're just not quite sure what their expectations would be. And as Alyssa said, maybe that group would be restaurants in your area. What could you do to help them? Maybe that group would be businesses or retail operations or churches or whatever it might be. But try to figure out a way to get a survey out to the group that you want to talk to. Here's the thing, though. You might do, and not excessively wordy. Thank you, Lynn. Excellent. Not excessively wordy and not library-ese. We don't talk about shelves and stacks and OCLC and literacy and all those kinds of things because that's library jargon. We all understand it. It's great. It's kind of shorthand for us. They're not going to understand that. It needs to be very layman's terms. Conversational is the best way you can do a survey. Just make it conversational as if you were standing right there having a cup of coffee with them and asking them questions. And again, as Lynn pointed out, not excessively wordy and not excessively long. Even if they're short statements, they don't want to fill out 3 pages. When I get an email request for a survey and they say this will only take about 10 minutes, I delete it. I don't have 10 minutes to do their survey. And then many times I will do a survey and they don't have all the answers. For instance, didn't use that service or whatever, and they don't have that answer. You can only rate it from 1 to 10, and I didn't use the service. And that's very frustrating for me because I'm not going to rate it 10. I didn't use it. Not fair to rate it a 1. I didn't use it. So make sure when you use that, when you develop a survey, a short, non-wordy, non-library-ease survey, give it to somebody outside the library that maybe knows about the library, uses the library occasionally, but isn't one of your frequent loyal people because they would understand everything that's being said. So give it to somebody that isn't that frequent a patron for you and say, would you read this and see if there's anything we need to clarify? Should we shorten it? Should we give more explanation? What needs to be done here? So you need to actually get involvement in the survey process too, don't you? That might be helpful for you. If you've done a lot of them and you've gotten great responses, then certainly use the same method you've used in the past. But if this is something new to you, you might want to get input as to whether it's user-friendly, short enough, clear enough that you will get the information you need and they won't feel put upon, because you don't want your patrons to feel put upon as you're trying to involve them in making these decisions about what's going to happen next. So face-to-face and surveys are excellent ways to do that. Comment cards, as somebody mentioned, you can have them at the desk. You could put one in the book that they're going to check out. You could have them laying around in piles at different places, maybe at a computer station, maybe in the quiet room if you have a quiet room, maybe on the small table that has a lamp on it, to give them a chance to fill it out without actually being approached by anybody. Because there are going to be certain people that wouldn't really feel comfortable with a face-to-face interview, if you will, but might feel comfortable with picking up a comment card. And that is something that the circulation staff could actually then say, did you get a chance to pick up a comment card and fill that out for us? It's so helpful, without actually being in their face about, would you fill this out right now, kind of a thing. Just say, did you have a chance to pick up a comment card? We find those really helpful. If they say yes, great, or I'm not interested, that's fine. We don't push. We're trying to involve them, not coerce them. So comment cards can be very helpful. Focus groups can be extremely helpful. What is it you're actually looking to decide? That's a great job for a focus group. Now you might include a volunteer on your focus group, a member of the Friends of the Library on your focus group, a staff member on your focus group, maybe somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience and somebody that does have a lot of experience, a loyal patron, and somebody that you know doesn't use the library very often. To sit down and do some brainstorming. Now again, as Lynn commented, you don't make the action of that lengthy because they don't want to give up 4 hours of their time to talk about the library. You make it very succinct, very concise. You have some questions to guide them. You make it a limited amount of time, and it may not even have to be in person. It could be just a focus group that you've chosen, and they've allowed you to email them the survey that you've created. And then you accumulate those responses and go through and see what variety you have there, sort of like New Zealand's new library. They had a huge focus group is what they tried to create to get that input. Now, I don't know if they had actual smaller focus groups behind the scenes, which would have been helpful to take those comments and then drill down and see what would be the benefit to the community, but focus groups can be very helpful. We see those on, usually it's a comedy show. If you watch TV, there will be some place where the comedian that's on the show will serve on a focus group, and it's usually a disaster or it's something silly happens or whatever. But obviously they work. That's why they use them as part of the plot, because focus groups are out there and they do work for people. Online surveys, if you can have something, again, not excessively wordy, just something where people can respond fairly quickly. For those of you who have been in face-to-face workshops with me, one of the things that I do to try to involve my folks is when I'm not under the auspices of someone else. For instance, when I'm doing Leadership Institute, they have their own surveys, so I do not interfere with that. But if I'm doing my own workshop, I will ask people to rate the program on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is the worst, 10 is the best. And I ask them to put down that number. And so they put down a number, and then after they've written the number, because I figure that was from their gut, I need to get their true response, then I say, if it was less than a 10, what would have made it a 10? And if it was a 10, what was the best part for you? That tells me two things. If it wasn't a 10, I get some really constructive feedback from that. Although sometimes I get should have had donuts, so that's not really constructive. But if it wasn't a 10, I do get constructive feedback. And if it was a 10, I also then learn what I should make sure I include in the future and not take out of there. Because sometimes people will say, add a section on this. Well, I have to take something out to do that to allow time. And so if I know that 4 people responded, oh, this was the best piece for me, I don't want to take that out. So sometimes it's asking them, what are we doing right? What could we do better? I saw a survey that a large company did probably 15 or 20 years ago, and they had a marketing group that put this long, drawn-out, non-Lynn Gestorf approved survey together because it was so convoluted, because it came from a marketing company, and it was long and drawn out, and it was very leading so that you would answer a certain way and the results would look glowing. And the company said, you know what, that's not what we're looking for. And even after they'd spent that money, they said, here's what we need to know. What are we doing well? That was on one side of the paper. You turn it over and it said, what could we do better? Wow. That was pretty succinct, pretty clear, and they got an exceptionally, they didn't get 100% participation, but they got high participation, and the participation they got was very enlightening because it told them, here's what you are doing well, keep doing it. And that's always good for you to know as well, isn't it? To involve your patrons, a diverse section of your patrons, in what are we doing well for your culture? What are we doing well for your age group? What are we doing well for your gender? What are we doing well for your interest? Because that's a whole different diversity too, isn't it? What people are interested in. Are you interested in Star Trek or butterflies? Kind of a thing. So what are we doing well for that? What could we do better? What could we do more of? What should we probably let go because it's kind of worn out? Just things like that that can be very helpful for you. And as someone said earlier, a website, forum, blog, something, discussions, whatever it might be, of something that's out there. And if you can make that anonymous, it's probably even more helpful, although sometimes that can lead people to be kind of mean. So maybe they could just put their initials in or something. So they do feel some kind of responsibility to keep it civil and to be thoughtful about it and not just post things on there that aggravate them because somebody was blocking the doorway the other day or whatever. So websites and forums and blogs also. Now, out of those, which one do you think your library could use more effectively? Social media, of course, is out there. Facebook comments, some of you are allowed to use Facebook, some of you are not. If you're not allowed, you might have some of your loyal patrons, your cheerleaders, put comments out there for you and say, you know, I was talking to somebody at the library the other day and they're looking for input on da-da-da. What do you think? And somebody else could post it on their Facebook and you might get some response that way. But which one of these that we've talked about, and I think we've talked about 6 of them, or more as we've discussed, which one could your library use effectively to involve people and make sure you stay diverse in what you're offering? Any comments there? Are any of you using any of these? Would you type that in the chat box? And how is it working for you? Part of what we're doing here today is to try to help you all come up with new ideas with each other. This is our survey, if you will, our comment card, our focus group, to get some input from other people who are using something that is or is not working, or would like to try something. Has anyone else tried it? So I see multiple attendees are typing. I'll give that a minute to filter through, and then we'll take a look at what we've got in our room today. Jamie said, we do use a lot of these. I like the idea of a focus group, especially to get more teen involvement. And pizza, right, Jamie? If you offer pizza or you can offer refreshments of some sort, especially for young people, that usually will draw them in and it usually relaxes them and they get a little more into the conversation, and that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for, when you're doing a focus group, you're not looking for, with teens, structure as much as you are just a conversation. Now, as you have an older group, and I'm talking, you know, out of school groups, then you might need to add a little more structure, because it seems as we get a little older, we start to getting a little, some of us start to get more reserved in our comments and our willingness to share, because what will somebody think of that? And as teens, they don't. So pizza, some sodas, sit down and have a discussion. Older groups might need to be a little more structured, and of course always have some things prepared as far as questions you have for them and so forth. Lynn said face-to-face works well. Darn, I wish this wouldn't skip over so easy. Okay, let's see. Works well if the question and answer is specific so the conversation doesn't go off track. Absolutely, Lynn. So it takes some thought, doesn't it? It sounds like you should just be able to start talking to people and get all the information you want in the next 30 days, but it really does take some thought and preparation. And I see somebody else commented. Yes, you do have to have food for teams, Jamie. I agree. Danielle says surveys and explaining the survey face-to-face works well. Absolutely. And Alyssa said trying to get more information. That's all this is about. You want to involve those people. You know, I always like to remind people that not that long ago, just a few short years before the internet took over everyone's lives, libraries didn't give a lot of thought to this kind of thing, because the library was the library was the library, and pretty much the people sat there and said, you know what, we've got a group of teens, let's have this. We've got a group of single moms, let's have this. And there wasn't a lot of involvement. There probably wasn't even a lot of diversity within the group to try to determine who needed to be involved. So now we have an opportunity that can really open things up for us and be a lot of fun to make sure that we're tapping into the people that we should be tapping into. So good. I'm glad to see some of you are using these, and I hope those of you who are not using them can find ways to incorporate at least one of these things, because we've had several ideas here today. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the best ways is face-to-face. That's great. But sometimes they just don't come to your library often or consistently. When they don't come to your library often or consistently, you may need to go to them. So have any of you gone out to a group to try to solicit input from them and involve them in your decision-making process of what you would like to program and so forth? Would you type that into the chat box? Has anybody gone out to any specific group to try to get feedback to make sure you're including people and involving people? Lynn said, went to a local high school once. How did that go, Lynn? I'm thinking maybe since you only went once, it might not have gone that well. Or maybe you got a lot of information and that's why you haven't had to go back. Women's Club meeting. Alyssa, when you spoke there, did you ask them for input as far as what the library could offer them? And as Alyssa and Lynn are responding to my questions for them, I'm going to throw this out to you. If you have the opportunity to speak at a women's club, a chamber of commerce, any of those kinds of things, one of the things that you can do as part of your preparation for your, quote, public speaking is you can end that with a question by saying, what I would like to do is take the last 5 minutes to ask you, what can the library do for you? Would you talk about that with the person next to you? And let's see if we can generate a few ideas of possible things the library could do for you. And that gives you a chance to involve your audience. It gives you a chance to get feedback. It does not guarantee you will get feedback, but if you give them a chance to actually talk to each other first, sometimes they're more receptive than to sharing that information than you just standing there and looking at the crowd one by one, expecting them to respond to you on an individual basis. Some people are very hesitant to do that. So if you give them a chance to kind of discuss it at their tables for a minute or two, just ask the person sitting next to you, what do you think the library should offer? And have that discussion, and then maybe they'll throw a few ideas at you. If they don't, you're not out anything. And if they do, you have some helpful information about how to program from now on. So we had the local high school, gathered a lot of information. Lynn said was extremely productive, but I think that said I'm not a youth services library, so one time was my limit. There you go, absolutely. But it was extremely productive. So right there you have a testimony that this stuff does work, but we have to make the effort. Alyssa says, I think, Ernestine went to the classroom in the different department on campus. Absolutely. And then what can I do for you, right, Ernestine? It's a different department, it's on campus, maybe we're not serving them as well, how can we serve them better? And Alyssa says, I think I told them more about what we already had available, and next time I'll ask them what they want. It's just a different thought process, isn't it, Alyssa? It's just a different way of thinking of it, because normally when we do go out to give a talk for the library, that's exactly what we do. You were right on target, Alyssa. Usually we say, here's what we have for you. But now when we're thinking about involving them, what a great opportunity. You have a captive audience. Now I will tell you that the silence can be unnerving if people aren't responding. And if they don't respond for 60 seconds or so after you ask that final question, now that you've discussed it with somebody at your table, what do you think the library could do for you? If nobody has any suggestions, if you heard them talking, you might say, gee, I heard a lot of you talking. Just throw out an idea. It doesn't mean we'll be able to do it, but at least we have some ideas to draw from. Try that. Ask another question or two. If nobody's responding, say, I really appreciate your time. If any thoughts come to mind, would you please give us a call or drop by the library and let us know how we can help you? Alyssa says, sometimes I worry that they will ask for things that are beyond what we can offer. And you can qualify that right up front, Alyssa. You can say, thanks, Lynn. I see the librarian comment. Alyssa, you can say something along the lines of, we probably aren't going to be able to offer everything everybody would want, but what we do want to do is involve everybody in the decisions. And that's a perfectly acceptable way to do that. The more ideas we have, the better our offerings will be. And the more appropriate they will be, because instead of us deciding what we think you would want, we'll be able to target them to what you've told us you want. Again, we can't promise we can do everything, and that's okay. They know that deep down, even though they would love for you to do everything, they still know you can't do everything. So you're okay there. So ask them what they want and just say, with your beautiful smile that I know you have, I can't promise we can do all of this, but at least we have some ideas to try to target things that you actually want. So that's perfectly acceptable. And I think that's part of our hesitation in general, Alyssa. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it's part of our hesitation to do the surveys, the focus groups, the online forums, and all of that is that we will get ideas of things we cannot do. I get things like that. People will say, I think we should do this, and it doesn't really fit into the day's programming because I don't have enough time, or we can't separate people in groups that way, or whatever it might be, but at least they gave me feedback, and if it's something I can use in the future, I certainly will. Of course, going to them addresses that issue, and when you go to them, you want it to be outside the library, just like you all just talked about. Sometimes you might even go out with no library agenda. You might just go hang around the high school and see what they're talking about. What are they talking about at lunch? What kind of games are they playing? What kind of activities are they involved in? You might just attend the chamber meeting and keep your ears perked up for what their needs are and so forth without actually saying anything. In other words, you might start building the relationship before you ask the questions. If you already have the relationship, go for it. But if you don't want to just jump in there, "Hi, I'm Linda. I want to know what you want from the library." Because that's a little bit off-putting too, isn't it? So maybe the first time I go to the chamber meeting, I just say, we're the library. We've never really been involved with the chamber, and we want to make sure we understand what the chamber does. And you just kind of sit back and listen. And maybe 2 meetings from now, you say, "Would you mind if I just ask for input from the chamber members?" Or talk to them for just a few minutes. Many times, a lot of those kinds of groups are looking for people to speak anyway because they need to fill their time. So it might be something they're very open to. So sometimes it might be without a library agenda, depending on what kind of a relationship you already have, and only you know that, but just use your judgment and go for it either way. Here's a hard one, and it sounds simple and it sounds very logical and it sounds like, well, of course we do that, but I think as human beings, we of course don't do that. We should go in with no preconceived notions about what they might want or need. If we go in thinking, well, these are single moms, so of course they're going to need help with XYZ, and that may not be their primary focus. They might just want a space and a time where they can sit with their kids and have story time and they can relax at the same time. We may not be thinking along the right terms. So if we can let go of all those preconceived notions about what they want or need, then that opens it up to actually listen to what they're going to tell us. In some cases, going to them also means finding the groups or the activities that they participate in or the places they hang out. Wherever that might be. We don't really know. If we knew that, we'd probably know more about them already. But we need to research, where do they hang out? If you're interested in the churches, for instance, and maybe you could go to one of the meetings at the church where they hang out, where the youth groups hang out, or the single people hang out at their meetings or whatever, and just kind of be there to observe and let them know that you're available, you're open to listening to them, and so forth. Involving patrons can also be a significant boost to building those relationships. That's what we've been talking about all along. It helps build the relationships. Then when you need more information 6 months from now, you already have that bridge built, don't you? You can go back to those same groups and say, "We love what you told us 6 months ago, and if you'll notice, we incorporated these 3 things, and now we're ready to do something fresh and new, and help us out. What is your feedback on this?" Building those relationships. Before reaching out, it's important to clarify your target audience. If it's an audience that you really aren't sure you have anything that you can help them with, for instance, the New Zealand library that was saying there are 180 different nationalities, it wouldn't be logical to reach out to every nationality to ask them what they need because you're not going to serve 180 nationalities, right? So clarify your target audience in your own mind as you're thinking about who you need to reach out to. Now that doesn't mean it has to be a large group. That's not necessarily always your target audience. There could be an unserved, in the marketing world they call it long tail marketing, and if you think about an animal with a long tail, there's a big clump there where the tail starts, their back quarters, if you will, and that's where the biggest space is. That's the same way in marketing. There's a big group that we market to, but there's also that tail that stretches out, and there might be small groups within that tail that you could serve really effectively. And they aren't going to blast your numbers out into the atmosphere because they aren't that big, but you're going to have a very loyal group when you're done because they are a small niche market that you can serve. There might be others in that same tail that what you have to offer is okay, but it would never be really that effective. So that's what I mean about making sure you understand your target audience. When you're determining that, you want to get input from a diverse selection of your staff. Again, nobody has all the answers. But pick the young people, pick somebody from a different culture, pick a person that's been there for a long time, pick a person that's fresh out of school, and then try to get input from them, especially those on the front lines that say, here's what I'm hearing. that we are missing, or here's what I'm hearing that we're doing really well. So when you're trying to think about your target audience, they know at least the people that are currently coming in. But they might also know people out in the community that aren't using the library. So talking to your staff enables you to tap into somebody who's familiar with the library and what it does and what you're trying to accomplish. They don't have any reason to hold back or be hesitant about sharing that with you, and they know not everything's going to be possible and so forth, but they might say, you know, I hang out with a group of friends that never come into the library. They would like to see XYZ. So now you've gotten complete feedback from somebody who's enmeshed in the library and knows what the library can do, but has a whole group of people in their lives that the group has not used the library. So maybe talk to those people on the front lines. Trust is a big part of this. When you're reaching out to people, they need to be able to trust you. And so that's why I said in some cases you might want to mingle with them first before you just jump in and throw out these questions for them. It depends on the group, but for instance, as we said with the teens, food always works. They trust you immediately if you give them pizza. I'm kidding about that. But truly, that, for some reason, over food thing does help develop the trust. So make sure you've got an element of trust there as you try to approach these people and talk to them about what you need from them. Sometimes it might be helpful to enlist somebody from your target audience when you actually want to go out and talk to somebody. So if you want to go out and talk to teens at the local high school and you know most of them don't use the library, is there one or two that do use the library? Are there one or two that do use the library? I'm not sure what the proper grammar there is, but is there somebody that already uses the library that you could actually ask? Yes, volunteers. Jamie, you ask them to go with you and say, would you mind introducing me to a few of your friends just so we can see how we could help them at the library? And then that trust, you get the trust sort of by proxy, don't you? Because the person that you're going to be talking to doesn't really know you, but the bridge, the person that you've invited to go along, has already developed trust with this other person. They trust you, so they create that bridge of trust, and so the other person now trusts you because their friend does. So sometimes that can be helpful. Not always necessary, but it's just another tip that might help you. It might help make it easier for you, and it might help make it easier for the other person to actually give you some answers because there's somebody there that they already trust. Ask your ally, the person that goes with you, what obstacles or barriers you might find. So when you get ready to go out and talk to this group, you might say to this teenager, so I've noticed that those people will never come to the library. What do you think their objections might be? What might they be hesitant to talk to us about? What might I get from them? The person might tell you they'll probably heckle you. They'll probably not feel comfortable with you. You may find that they say, well, there's no way we can get there, or whatever it might be. So some of the obstacles or barriers you might find might be physical issues. What obstacles or barriers you might find as far as can they get to the library physically? That might be a group that you're trying to tap into. Is there transportation available? Or if we go there, are we going to need to be willing to take whatever we decide on to them once we develop it? Because if transportation is an issue now, just because the library decides to offer something different does not mean the transportation issue will go away for them. So if that's already an obstacle or barrier, know that in advance. So when they say, well, I don't have any way to get to the library, you can say, we've kind of thought that through, and depending on the programs and services we come up with, we will probably be able to bring some of those to you. So then you've kind of planned in advance for that. In other words, you're going to kind of role play what might happen when you talk to this group if you're not familiar with them already. It might be an accessibility issue for them. They don't have a permanent address, or they don't have a library card, or they don't want to get a library card, or whatever it might be. So there might be some issues there that you hadn't really thought through. And the reason I mention this is because if you go out there and start talking to these people and they bring up these issues and they catch you off guard, then that's where your mind goes, and you can get very sidetracked from actually trying to develop a conversation with them about how you can help them to, oh my gosh, I should have thought about, why didn't I think about this? And your mind goes there, and then all of a sudden your productive meeting with these people falls apart because you didn't think of that in advance. You're not going to think of everything, but if you can think it through before you go out to another group, that will just be one more tool in your toolbox to help you involve these people in what you're going to decide to offer them. So again, don't worry about planning for everything. You all are good on your feet. That's why you work in a library. People ask you odd questions all the time and present things that you're not expecting. So I know you can handle that part. Other issues that might come up, language. Obviously, if you're going to be talking to someone who has Spanish as their primary language, maybe you want your ally to be somebody that speaks Spanish so that they can, if you do have any obstacles or start to misunderstand each other, they can clarify that for you. So language might be an issue. There might be financial barriers that this person mentions. Well, I don't want to join a book club because it costs me gas money to go there. So that's a legitimate thing, and if you know about that in advance, maybe somebody would sponsor gas cards or something to come to book club. I'm just throwing ideas out here. Anything you can do to get them involved. It would be a shame for a whole group of people to miss out because they can't afford the gas to get to the library. So if it's financial and they can't afford the gas, is there a meeting place near where this group usually congregates where you could offer the service that you're talking about offering, so that they don't have to have gas money for that? Are there policies and rules? Do we have to have library cards? Do we have to pay fines if it's late? Do we have to do this and that? Some of the reasons some people don't come to the library and check out books and things like that is because of the policies and rules we've instated. That's not to say they're bad policies and rules. It's just to say that it can be a barrier to some people. So when you're talking to your ally, your person that belongs to this group that's going to go with you, or if you don't have one, thinking this through yourself, what are some of the policies and rules that might keep this group from joining in? What is the rule that we can't have this kind of a meeting after 4 o'clock, but the group that we're talking to works usually until 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening? So policies and rules. Think through what might be a barrier so that you're prepared to address that when you meet with that group. Fear for them. Libraries can be scary places. The world is a scary place, but that's their comfort zone. And going to a library where there's this wealth of knowledge and everybody that works there knows everything about everything, that's what some people think. So if that fear is there, one way to alleviate that fear, or at least lessen it, is when you go out to them to just sit and have that conversation. So now you're a person. You're not the librarian. You're a person. So you can alleviate some of that fear. But if you understand that might be part of the issue for them, sometimes the fear is fear of judgment. If you're going to a single moms group, maybe they've had issues in the past with people judging them or causing just grief in their lives or making them upset about the way they feel, then libraries are the most welcoming place in the world. And if you know that's what they're going to feel, you make sure that you exude that welcoming, nurturing, we love you, come see us, we can help with the baby, that kind of a feeling. So there's all different kinds of fear that can underlie that. Maybe just fear that they don't, quote, know enough to come to the library. Some people feel as if you have to be at some level of education to even go to the library. But that's not the case, is it? So that fear might be an underlying reason why it might be a little bit of a challenge to get those people involved. You want to personalize the invitation to participate when you can. If you can, maybe even actually send them an invitation. If you're doing a focus group, to send them an invitation, but you want it to be personalized. When I'm asked for these online surveys and things, it never feels personal, and I never feel like they're listening to me, to be honest. So many times, I got a survey, I bought a car a year ago, and I bought it from a different dealer than my last car because I got such poor service at the last dealer that I bought it an hour away. So I had a question, and I emailed where I was supposed to email, which apparently goes through the actual manufacturer's website of the car. I didn't get an answer for 6 weeks. I finally got an answer, and they said, "We see that you had a question about this. What can we help you with?" So I emailed back, and I said, "Here's the question. What do I need to do?" I've never heard from them. That was 2 months ago. That's not personalized service. They will tell you their service is exceptional. I need to have an oil change on my new car that I have to schedule today, and I will be telling them when I visit there in a very nice way that your service stinks. I probably won't say it that way, but there was nothing personalized about that. When that person saw that I had that question from 6 weeks ago, someone should have picked up the phone. So when you're trying to involve people in what you're offering, you don't want to make it as if it's coming from a marketing company. You want it to be personalized. And so many places today, we're all used to getting these cards about, oh, it's your birthday. Oh, it's time for your pet to come in for a vaccination. Oh, we're so glad this happened with your pet, and blah, 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 but it's not personalized. It's run through a computer. The algorithm shows that it's time for a vaccination. There's no personalization. So personalize that invitation when you can to try to invite them. Make them feel special. Remember what we said. People want to feel valued, appreciated, that you listen to their thoughts, that they're being heard, and the way to do that is to personalize it. Emphasize the benefits to the group of becoming involved. And what are the benefits? Well, the benefits are things like, if you help us design this, then we know that we're designing a program that's exactly what you want, or we'll get as close to that as we can. So the benefits are, it's their program, it's their idea, it's their service, it's their event that they own because they had input on it, and that's why they'll be more engaged in it. There's an organization called America Speaks, and it talks about getting people involved. So ways of getting invitations out into the communities you serve: distribute flyers where they live or hang out to invite them. If you put a flyer in a church and it's for a group of people who don't believe in going to church, but they hang out at the local bar, and there's nothing wrong with that. I was doing a program a few years ago for people looking for jobs, and we were talking about where would you market to these people? How do you get them into the library so you can help with their resume? And one of the librarians said, we hang things up at the local bar because when they're out of work, that's where they go. So distribute flyers where they live or hang out. Canvass the areas where they live or hang out. Obviously, you want to be aware of safety features. You're not going to do this at night. You are going to go with somebody else. I wouldn't canvass my own area at night by myself, and I live in a retirement community now. I'm not retired, never want to retire, but that's where I live. And I would not go out at night, even though this is one of the safest communities, I think, in our entire area. It's a worldly issue, isn't it? The world is not as safe as it used to be. So if you're going to canvass the area, go in pairs, go during the day, go when they're going to be there. Develop public service announcements for the radio stations that they listen to. A lot of places actually solicit public service announcements because it helps fill the airways, and they're more than happy to do that. So sometimes announcing it on a radio station that they might listen to will draw them in. Contact houses of worship that they might attend. If it's a group that you think is actively involved in a church, synagogue, temple, whatever, then that might be the place that you would try to encourage people to hang flyers or talk about this focus group that you're going to have, or this survey that you want to do, or whatever it is. Run ads in local papers if you can. And sometimes local papers or community newspapers or the smaller papers will do things like that for free, so it's not as costly for you. Post information on websites they visit. Your website's great, but if they're not going there, they're not going to do the survey. So what websites do they visit? Now, obviously, you would want to make sure that is a safe area to be in and an ethical, you want to make sure it's an appropriate website. And again, these are just suggestions from America Speaks, but they are very pointed to how to get people involved in helping you serve them. And then you need to follow up. Once you've done these things with them, you need to make sure you're following up with them. After you've put things together, after you've collected the surveys, you might put a flyer out that says we've got all the surveys. It's going to take us about a month to go over it, and then we're going to post the results of it and let you know what direction we're headed in. I worked for a company once that I insisted we need to do a customer survey. I think, developed a fairly decent one. I look back and it could have been better, but it wasn't too bad, and it wasn't the marketing speak kind of a thing. It was more open-ended. And we got a lot of good feedback, and I went through and analyzed it all. I would take it home and analyze it because I thought it was very important. And once I did the report got stuck away in the president's desk drawer. Wow. Our customers were frustrated. I was frustrated because the customers said, we gave some suggestions and some very logical, inexpensive suggestions, but nobody ever got back to us. Well, I wasn't going to call him up and say he put it in his desk drawer. So it really was a letdown from a lot of angles, and I never tried it again, sadly. There was no reason to because it wasn't going to get processed. So make sure you're following up. So what other ways can you extend that invitation to your target audience? Create the PSA for your local TV station if you have one, or in my community we have a community TV station. They never mind putting people's announcements up there. Post ads at bus stations and subways. Where do people commute in your community? If it's a group that you're trying to target and that's how they travel, then post the ad at the bus station. Create ads for benches. Maybe it's a bench you can put an ad on that somebody would let it be a public service announcement. You see ads on benches all the time. So again, lots of different ideas here, hoping that a few of them will be something that you'll be able to utilize. Not everybody can use everything, but hopefully everybody can use something out of what we've talked about today. So what other ways can you extend an invitation to your target audience, or have you extended an invitation to your target audience to become involved? Would you think about that for just a second and type it into the chat box, please? And I know for many of you, this is kind of a new idea to think about, so maybe there's not been any experience, but as you're thinking, what other ways could you extend an invitation? Maybe it's something like partnering with a community organization so that you have their credibility and their trust with their group already built in, because most community organizations recognize the value of a library. So there's an inherent aspect of trust with that community organization, and if they have the same goals of serving your target group as you do, then maybe you could partner with them and say, would you mind if we posted flyers here, if we participated in this activity to try to get more information? Alyssa said Friends of the Library, absolutely. Local library consortiums, absolutely. Colleges and universities, absolutely. All places that you can extend that invitation. You might even go to a college or a university and set up a little table in their lobby to talk to people as they're going by, if that's your target audience. Most colleges and universities would probably allow you to do that unless you're directly competing with their library, and in many cases you would not be. A lot of them have special kinds of focuses, so you could do that. Maybe even Head Starts and YMCAs and daycare programs, other schools, wellness organizations, different kinds of parent groups, homeschoolers, as I said earlier, mothers of preschoolers. That's one of the ways you can extend that invitation to them. You know, mothers of preschoolers are a specific group, obviously, but they also have friends that probably don't belong to that group that would be in your target audience that could help you with this. Same way with homeschoolers. If that's a target audience for you, there may be other people that they know that do or don't homeschool but would be in the same age group, the same mindset, that you could utilize that. I see some people are typing, so I want to see what their ideas are that are popping up here. I wish the screen when it says people are typing would actually start showing me what's being typed so I would know what's coming up. Yes, absolutely, Lynn. Offer an open house. Sometimes maybe even, I'm going to spin off of Lynn's idea here, offer an open house at their location and set up something really nice and offer refreshments and do your survey there, an open house at their location. And as Ernestine said, an after-school program to just sit and talk. If they're used to after-school programs, have an after-school program and say, okay, here's what we've been doing at the library. What do you like about that? What do you think would be fun for you? What other kinds of things would be fun for you? It kind of takes an ability and a willingness to put yourself out there, doesn't it? To really be effective at involving your community and making sure you're being diverse, which is all of those things we talked about earlier, culture, ethnicities, age, gender, all the things we talked about, then it takes a willingness to reach out to those people, and reaching out to them always can't be done from inside the library. Sometimes we just have to get out there to reach out to them and include that diversity, because right now they're not there. So obviously we have not included that diversity in some instances. So based on the ideas that we've talked about, in what specific physical locations in your community, your service area, whatever that is, whether it's your immediate city, whether it reaches out to your county, whatever it is, might you distribute flyers or canvass the areas to reach these people? Just be thinking about this. Different cultures. So jot yourself a note. If you've got your handouts there in front of you, under different cultures, where would you personally, and your library specifically, go if you were trying to reach out to different cultures in your market area, if you will? Maybe places like, as somebody said, places of worship, maybe even grocery stores. Somebody told me the other day that, I don't think it was a Publix, but they had heard about somebody who put library flyers up above different departments in the grocery store. For instance, in the produce department, a gardening library flyer, or a food prep library flyer in the produce department of the grocery store. So just kind of off the wall places that we've never had to consider before, because we've never really needed or thought about, I should say, reaching out to such a diverse audience before. We just assumed if they wanted to use the library, they would come in. That's what we thought many years ago. Now we need to do more reaching out. Alyssa says some coffee shops have community bulletin boards like Starbucks and Panera. Absolutely. Where you can post something, we want to help you. How can we do that? So places you can reach out to people. Community centers, if they're of a different culture. How about genders? Where are you going to reach out? Well, maybe women's groups like Women in Networking. I used to belong to a group called Women in Networking, and the group got together specifically to see how we could help each other. Wow, what a great fit for a library. That's what they're doing. They're there to help each other. We weren't a leads group, and if you've ever heard of a leads group, they can be very intimidating. I belonged to one once because I thought it was more like the networking group, and then I found out they require you to bring 3 leads for every meeting. And so if there was somebody in there that sold tires, and somebody else that printed business cards, and somebody else that did this or that, I had to find 3 members and then find 3 of my friends or acquaintances that they might be able to sell to. That's not for me. I don't know about all of you. I only went to 2 meetings and I figured that out, and I thought, that's not what this is about. I want to actually network with people. So as I said, do some checking. Do you have a Women in Networking group? Do you have a Toastmasters group? Do you have men's groups that specifically cater to male business people or entrepreneurs or something like that? Maybe it's different genders, and that's where you're going to tap into those kinds of groups. Different age and life stage groups. How do you tap into those people? Maybe it's parents with young children. Where would you go? As I said, mothers of preschoolers, the homeschoolers, the after-school program that Ernestine mentioned. Alyssa says, I just discovered meetup.com and had no idea that there were so many clubs out there. Exactly. It doesn't mean you have to become a member of each of them, does it, Alyssa? But it gives you exposure to them so that the ones that you think you might be able to target, you can go out there and actually attend a meeting as a guest and just get a feel for what they're looking for. What are they offering? What are they focusing on? Is it something that would be a good fit for the library? Because not everything will be. So different age and life stage groups, such as parents with young children, young adults, middle-aged individuals. They might have children at home. Their children might be gone. They might not have children. Some of them might be raising grandchildren. So all of those kinds of groups are the groups that you need to think about, and where are you going to reach them? If their children are gone or they don't have children, they might be at museums, they might be at restaurants, they might be at festivals. If they have children at home, they might be at soccer games or music recitals or dance classes, those kinds of places. And the thing here is to think about is that sometimes it's not a matter of somebody just jumping in to a pool they've never been in before to go to a dance class. Maybe there's somebody on staff that already has kids involved in soccer, and you could make a tie-in that way. Mature individuals. I get tired of calling them the elderly because every year I get older. I don't know about you all, but maybe you go to the 55 plus communities who are often looking for programs to offer their different groups. In my community, we have, and I don't know how many there are, but there are at least 100 different clubs. There are computer clubs, there are political clubs, there are just social clubs, there are singles clubs, there are history kinds of clubs. It's just amazing. There are card clubs. There are all kinds of things. So let's say you thought you could tap into a little bit of that market. Maybe you could go to the card club, and maybe you could offer workshops at the library on how to learn to play, I don't know what the card games are, Bunko or whatever. And you could tie it in that way and get some of them to actually have their meetings at your library. So again, differences, introverts, extroverts. Where would you go? Well, you might go to a park to catch an introvert group, and you might go to festivals to get the extroverts. Different hobbies and interests. As I mentioned, in my community, there are probably 100. Where are their clubs meeting currently? Do you know somebody that already meets with them? Is there something that you think you can tag onto? Again, don't spread yourself so thin. You're trying to look for those niche markets that you can really serve well, not trying to serve every individual in your market area. That would be wonderful, and certainly you have things available that could serve them, but for you to focus your time and effort, it needs to be where you think it will be beneficial. Differing education levels. They're going to hang out differently where they learn. If they're in high school, that's where they're going to be. If they're an undergrad, they're going to be hanging out at a different place probably than a graduate student would, or an alumnus. How about the unemployed? If you want to target them, where are they hanging out? Well, maybe at your workforce board office, and maybe you need to build a relationship with your workforce board to see how you can plug into their puzzle and be another piece of that and in a helpful way. And as I mentioned, some people say they hang out in bars, and if that's the case in your area, that might be a great place to post a flyer. Again, when you're posting flyers and things, please, please, please be very aware about what you're naming these things so that it doesn't sound very lofty and theoretical and all of those kinds of things. You don't want to talk about financial literacy. You want to talk about how to save money or cut your budget or something like that. The word literacy scares people and makes them feel bad. That's what I've read, and I would think that's, personally, I would think that's probably true. So again, make sure your libraries that you use is not overwhelming to the people that you're trying to interact with. Maybe they're at food banks, the unemployed, and that would be a good place to say, we're having a job skills session, or we want to talk to you about how we can help you. So you're involving them. The physically challenged, where might they be? A lot of them are going to be at home. So that's when you canvass an area possibly and talk to them. What can we do to help you? Did you know we had this service? What else could we add to that to make it beneficial for you? Small business owners, where are they going to be? Maybe at chamber meetings or some other kind of service-oriented group like Kiwanis or Lions Club or something like that. So just think about that. Where do you need to go? What are some areas? I know the people in this room. I know many of you. I've been with you in many classes, and I know your ideas are bubbling. I don't want you to overwhelm yourself thinking, well, I might as well not do anything because there's no way I can reach all these people. You're right. There isn't any way you can reach all these people. My hope for you today is that we've talked enough about involving people and getting a diverse group involved that you go away with a couple of ideas and you say, you know what, that's an area I really think we should look at. Let's take a look at that one first, see what we can find out, do a survey. Is there anything we can help with? After we've done that and we've created programming or services or events for them, then let's look at another area. I don't want you to try to look at 6 or 8 or 12 of them at one time. I want you to think about My library would serve this group really well, but I don't think we are currently because we've never reached out to them, and then figure out a way to do that. Don't overwhelm yourself. So once you've enlisted the group's help to try to keep them engaged, ask them to test programs and services and give you feedback. So maybe you've gone out to a group and they've been very happy to be involved with the teens, with the pizza and the soda, and they've given you feedback and you've developed a program for them, and then you touch base with them to keep them involved and say, okay, we would like to do a beta test on this, and with just your group. This time only, let's not invite anybody else. Let's just have your group do it and let us know what we're doing well and what we can tweak to make it even better when we start to invite other people. Then you've made them feel even more special, and when it comes time to invite other people, they're going to be anxious to do that because now they want their friends involved. But they're going to feel special because, you know what? I didn't invite my friend the first time because they wanted our input first. So ask them to test those programs. Keep them engaged that way. Don't forget that involving others is everybody's job. It's circulation's job. It's the people that are weeding's job. It's the people at the rough desk's job. It's administration's job. It's the volunteer's job. It's everybody's job, trying to involve others. If you have your antenna up all the time, some of this stuff will come to you without you even doing anything specific to solicit that feedback from people to keep them involved. They'll just make casual comments, and when you hear that casual comment, you can say, oh, well, how do you think that would play out at the library? And all of a sudden you have somebody involved in helping you make sure you're giving a diverse offering to your community. So it's everyone's job. What I want you to think about is, what are the benefits for your library of involving the patrons in programming and service decisions in the midst of diversity? What are some of those benefits? How will that help your library? Would you type that into the chat box? What brought you to today's session? How did you think it would benefit your library? Involving patrons to make sure you're including diversity. Yes, Jamie, it gets more people in the library, isn't it? Doesn't it? And it's a diverse group of people that we're getting into the library, because that's what we're thinking of when we're trying to involve them, is making sure we're staying diverse and we're keeping people involved and keeping them engaged. And Alyssa says giving people what they want. And we don't know that, do we? We can assume, and many times we are right. That's why we make assumptions. We are right sometimes, but we really don't know until we ask them. And Lynn says, new ideas, new blood. I love that. Expansion of the library vision. Not that we're going to serve every individual in our community, although, as I said, we do have things that would serve them, but that our vision now has encompassed these different pockets of diversity that we can involve in our libraries. Now we have more people, we have more ideas, we have a more viable and vital library in our community. And Corsina said getting more people into the library for better resources. People are resources too, aren't they? They help us continue to grow and continue to serve in a way that we might not be able to do that if we're doing it on our own. You have happier patrons because now you've included more people. You have more visibility. If you are led, I will say, by city council or county commissioners or somebody at a different level, and they really don't pay a lot of attention, when you start to make these concerted, intentional efforts to involve people and get them involved in your diversity activities, then all of a sudden you're more visible, which makes you more viable and more vital in the community, more valuable in the community, and makes you maybe a lot farther down on the list of considerations to close a library if they decide to do budget cuts. Because you've made that effort and you've shown that you are trying to tap into the diversity in your community by involving people in what you should do. An increased support base, absolutely, and everybody can use that, can't they, Len? Maybe that means more funding. Yay. Or maybe it just means people that support you and would scream and yell and holler if somebody said they were going to close your library. That never hurts, does it? You want people that would scream and yell and holler if somebody was going to close your library. And then it helps you, as somebody said, increase your vision, fulfill your mission. That's what it's all about. Why do you go to work every day? Because you want to serve those people. So the way to do that is to help them help you understand what they need in your community. How might that awareness of the need for involving others impact how you interact with others? Well, hopefully it will make you ask more questions, observe more behaviors, more interactions with the programs and events that you currently have, listen better, because I think some of this information is floating around out there of how we could include diverse populations and involve them in our decision making. And we just haven't tuned into it as much. Not because we're bad listeners, but because we never thought it was something that would be valuable to us. And it would be, wouldn't it? So as the little slide there shows, practice being present and hearing what they're saying and how they're responding. So the last question, of course, is what will you use from today's session? How are you going to incorporate diversity into involving others with that decision-making process as it pertains to programming and services offered by your library? So jot yourself a note at the bottom of page 3 of how you will use what you learned today and the investment of time that you made today so that it will benefit the diversity in your library. Thank you for being here. You all know that you have my email address at the bottom of your handouts if you need to reach out to me and ask any questions or try to flesh an idea out that's rolling around in your mind and you're just not quite ready to verbalize it in your library. Feel free to drop me a note. I'm more than happy to respond to those things and try to flesh out more of the idea for you or answer any questions that I can. I look forward to hearing from you in the future at a future webinar or maybe even a face-to-face workshop. And in the meantime, if you need me, you know how to find me. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, Linda, for a wonderful webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to advertise the capstone event of the Diversity Discovery Institute. It is Diversity Day, which will take place Wednesday, August 24th. The link is up on the Swiftland calendar for you to register, and an agenda will be sent out hopefully in the next couple of weeks about what the day will pertain. It will be celebration of diversity, and we'll feature almost all our presenters for Diversity Discovery Institute webinars, and Linda will be there. So come out and meet the woman herself, the Queen of Diversity. So great information and a sneak peek of what is coming up. Attendees, be sure to sign up for the next webinar of Swiftland's Diversity Discovery Institute, T is for Taking Action, on Friday, June 17th. The next webinar of Swiftland's DigiRef Academy will take place on June 2nd, and that will cover resources for natural sciences. And the next STEAM webinar will take place on June 15th and will cover the arts of STEAM. We encourage you to look at the Swiftland website and our CE calendar for all the upcoming webinars and workshops in months ahead, and we hope you are able to join us for the future training opportunities. So again, please look at our CE calendar on the website. Look on the Florida statewide training calendar. Check out our Facebook page. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, and also look for your message from the Florida Library listserv. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, Linda.
And thank you, Erin, and have a great trip. And I want a full accounting when you get back.
I will give you everything and then some. And
okay, great. Have a
to,
good time.
I will try to. And then I can take all my materials and create workshop after workshop for us. Yes.
Hey, I'll work on it. I won't copy, though. I will not copy.
All right. Well, of course not.
All right.
You get copied, but you do not copy.
Right, exactly. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.